Welcome in, everybody, to Thursday's edition of Birds 365. My good partner Johnny Mack is here, and we're going to talk about rookie minicamps. We got two great guests lined up today. We got Johnny Stolness and a fan favorite, Bill Colarulo. All the people in the chat box have been looking for Bill Colarulo, so we'll touch back in with Bill Colarulo today from 97.5 The Fanatic. Johnny Mack, a good Thursday to you, sir. How you doing today?
Doing well. Happy rookie minicamp eve for those who like to celebrate that. Exciting times.
Yeah, when you put out the dates, I'm going to pull them up just so that people are informed. So it looks like there's three. You can explain for the people what the difference is. There's a rookie minicamp, which is obviously for the rookies, and then there's OTA off-season workouts, and then there's mandatory minicamp, which I guess would be for everybody. So the rookie minicamp is May 3rd, May 4th, which is tomorrow and Saturday. And then you have the OTA off-season workouts, which are May 20th, May 22nd, and 23rd. May 28th, and then May 30th and 31st, and then mandatory minicamp is June 4th to 6th. So what do you expect to learn from these? Can you watch them? Do you see anything? Is it really just to get the players acclimated? What should we look forward to learning from this, especially with the rookies, where I think you're starting to see some new faces?
Yeah, it's more just acclimation, trying to get everything, especially when you have two new coordinators again. And this is the first mandatory minicamp of the Nick Sirianni era. Because if you go back, they had scheduled a mini camp in his first year, but that was the end of COVID. The league and the Players Association were going back and forth. There wasn't off-season work prior to that. They were, hedging and dragging their feet. So Nick sort of got together with some of the veteran players and said, all right, will you come in for the OTAs, the voluntary work, and we'll scrap the mini camp. And that's what was agreed upon. And all of a sudden they overachieved. They made the playoffs. So it's like, well, no reason to change.
Right.
Then
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah. Then they go to the Super Bowl, and there's obviously no reason to change. Now there's reason to change. So minicamp is back for the first time since Doug Peterson. That's the most valuable because we get to watch. Those are open to the media in their entirety. So we get to watch the entire practice, and it's been a long time since we've been able to do that. Rookie minicamp will be in there tomorrow, but we don't get to see much, just basically 10, 15 minutes like a regular season practice. And then in the cluster of OTAs, I like to call them, you have these 3-day clusters. You get a one open to the media. And again, it's more 10, 15 minutes, more an opportunity to get video pictures of players. And you get to talk to Nick Sirianni and certain players. So that's the more valuable part. But as far as on-field work, yeah, we don't get a good handle till minicamp, and at least we're going to have minicamp this year. So that's something. And probably the most notable is where guys are lining up. You can see the skeleton of the depth chart where they're going to start when training camp begins in late July. So, but you're not going to learn meaningful battles or how Vic Fangio is going to change things up, or how Kellen Moore, even more importantly, because on offense they're supposed to change somewhat. Defense, they're essentially playing the same scheme, but hopefully it's better taught. It's people understand it better. There's better communication, that type of thing. So you're not going to get any of that really, to be honest, until training camp. But you're going to see a lot of excitement. T-shirts and shorts are the time for the athletes.
The occasional viral social media video of somebody making a good catch or something.
Yeah. For the, maybe you see some coverage techniques and, but even that, it's very limited. So it's for the guys, think about, I always go back to Donnell Pumphrey, how excited people were to see him on the field, because he was undersized jitterbug. So that was his wheelhouse, the t-shirts and shorts. And then when the pads came on, it was like, oof, we might have a problem here. So, um, you know, take it all with a grain of salt, but it's good to get on the field. Good to get some grass time.
Yeah, agreed.
Peterson references.
Yeah, so good that fans are looking forward to that. That's right around the corner. So everybody can tune in on social media. I'm sure John will be covering it extensively. Make sure you follow John J.F. McMullen. I want to thank everybody, all of our chatters, Twiz, Dave, Luke, and Callie, and the Dank for checking in with us today. We appreciate all your guys' viewership. Make sure you like the show, as it's the number one thing you can do to help us grow, to help the show reach more Eagles fans. So we appreciate that. And then I said it yesterday, and I want to give a shout out to anybody listening to the podcast this morning or any morning. Our podcast numbers are tremendous, and we appreciate you on there. If you're listening on there, make sure you leave us a review so that we can reach more Eagles fans as well. John, we talk about this a lot, and this is going to be a tough conversation for some fans or for maybe even you to answer this. What equals success this year for the Eagles? We talked a little bit about yesterday, Nick Sirianni being on the not the hot seat, but he's a lame duck coach. If he doesn't perform this year, he could be on the outs. What equals success this year? I mean, and you talked about it last year where the expectations were so inflated that if they didn't make it to the Super Bowl, it was a failed season, which is just a little bit out of whack. What should we be expecting at least going into this season? And what do you think would be enough for, say, Nick to stick around for another year?
Well, making the playoffs isn't it? That happened last year, and they got bounced and embarrassed, and that wasn't good enough. So it starts there from my perspective, and really only one person matters here, and that's Jeffrey Lurie. What are his expectations?
Right.
If you're talking about the fan base, their expectations are sky high. You know, is that realistic to go to the Super Bowl or win the Super Bowl? It's probably never realistic unless you're Kansas City going into a season. A lot of things have to align to go to a Super Bowl, never mind win the Super Bowl. So I always think that's, but unfortunately that's kind of the landscape of pro sports. I always joke it's turned into Ricky Bobby rules. If you're not first, you're last.
Right.
And I don't believe that. I don't think most NFL teams and NFL coaches and NFL executives believe that. I think there's, it's a process. The Eagles have taken a step back, try to take 2 steps forward. That doesn't mean it's going to happen immediately. I would say he's got to win a playoff game at least, or at the bare minimum, be competitive if and when they're ousted. And I think that should be enough for Jeffrey Lurie, but Jeffrey's far more tempered than I don't think that's going to be acceptable to the fan base. I think they think this is a great team. And, and I put out those implied betting odds yesterday. The Eagles were like 7th or 8th, and that's probably where they should be. Point being, there's better teams on paper still. So if you're assuming they're the best team, your expectations are probably a little bit out of whack to this point. They got a lot of changes on defense. They need a lot of things to go right on defense. They need young players to hit the ground running. They need reclamation projects to play well. That's a lot of pieces that have to come together. And the thing about Nick, his clock has started. Doesn't mean it's over. So whether you talk about lame duck or whether you talk about there's a period you have when you're hired as a head coach, and it's getting smaller and smaller, where you have a little bit of rope, and then the clock starts. And that usually starts, the evidence of that is when you're getting rid of coordinators. All right. They're the scapegoats.
Right.
They're the problem by definition. So fix the problem, and then it's on you. So if the problem still exists,
Right.
that's
They're
how
not gonna.
coaches get fired. And the
I think it's
clock
a
is
lot
never.
trickier too when you consider. I mean, we're talking about expectations from the defensive side of the football. I think expectations are marginal. They're regular. The defense stunk last year. If they're top 15, I think fans are happy. But you go to the offensive side, you got two wide receivers making all that money. You got Jalen Hurts making that money. They added now, the big name running back and Saquon Barkley, who they're paying big money to. You extended all the offensive linemen. I think the offensive side is where it gets really tricky, where if this isn't a high-powered offense, I think there's going to be a lot of people, fans, and maybe people in the front office included, who are not happy with the way it's moving. So there's a lot of pressure, on Sirianni coming into this season, especially from the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, and they're gonna be high powered, but even that isn't the answer because they were high powered last year and it wasn't good enough.
Yeah, but they collapsed. So they were high powered until week 12 rolled around, and then all of a sudden they turn into this terrible team, and everybody always only remembers what it's like. It's a
Yeah,
what have you done for me lately league, right? I mean,
there's a lot of recency bias
right.
but again, they improved in a lot of areas, a lot of important areas on offense, which is crazy to think about from the year prior. Most notably, fourth downs, third downs, and that's what Nick emphasizes situational football. They were better on third and fourth downs than they were the year prior. Um, but yeah, they finished poorly. The quarterback regressed. I argue the only difference between the Eagles' offense in 2022 and 2023 is the turnovers. I think if you eliminate them, it's pretty much the same group. You probably go from 8 back to 3. Um,
Isn't
and
that a
anything,
cause for concern, though, John? I mean, everybody improved, and Cilio points this out all the time. And I push back on him, but at some point, he's right. Where AJ Brown improved, Devontae Smith improved, everybody improved except the quarterback. And the quarterback's the one guy you need to improve, probably more than everybody else.
well, yeah, it's the most important position on the field. So he's more important by definition. Um, and yeah, but I look at it, when people were making fun of Dak Prescott a couple years ago, he had a big turnover season. And Eagles fans were enjoying that and, taking shots. And I said, be careful. His history says he's not a high turnover player. And there's a randomness to turnovers that sometimes you can't control.
Right.
Some you can. You have to look at each individual one. I always bring Jalen, the Jets game. That's Jalen Hurts. That's something he can correct. Seattle game, that's Jalen Hurts. That's something he can correct. Tip football going the wrong way. There's some randomness to that. But usually guys who take care of the football well, they might have an outlier season where the ball just isn't bouncing their way, and they generally regress back to what they typically are. And that's what I think is going to happen with Jalen Hurts because his history says he takes care of the football. He didn't do it as well as he should have last year. And I think that's a relatively easy correction. And maybe that gets you from 8 to 5 right there. And maybe you need a little bit more improvement. There's some other concerns I'm kind of amazed how quickly people just assume the offensive line is going to be just as good without Jason Kelsey and without a defined answer at right guard. Um, that could be an issue, and that could affect the offensive consistency, despite how good Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Lane Johnson are. And Lane's getting older. At some point, you're going to have a decline there. There's some questions. You still need to figure out who the second tight end is. You still have to figure out who the third receiver is. And God forbid if AJ or DeMonte get hurt. I mean, that's dropping off a cliff to number 3, whoever your favorite is, whether it's Paris Campbell or
Yeah.
Devontae Parker or Johnny Wilson or Anais Smith. That is dropping off a cliff. But you can't have backups as good as A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. That's not realistic. So that's where I said a lot of things have to align to go to a Super Bowl or make a deep playoff run in the NFL, unless you have an eraser like Patrick Mahomes. And with all due respect to Jalen Hurts and anybody else at quarterback, they're not Patrick Mahomes. They're
Real
not.
quick on Jalen Hurts, you talked about regressing to the mean with the turnovers. How much do you put into, though, the fact that they played? I know it wasn't a completely different offense, but he didn't run the RPO. He didn't have he was more of a passing quarterback last year, didn't run the ball as much, and the turnovers go up. Now they bring in Kellen Moore, who's a guy who's going to spread the football around, or at least call plays to spread the football around. Is that a problem?
I don't know. I mean, we had the knee injury, so how much did that affect the Eagles' mentality when Jalen clearly wasn't 100% when it came to the running game? At the end of the day, I think it was he ran it 165 times in 2022, 157 in 2023. So there was no grandiose movement from that perspective. Now he obviously missed a couple games, so there's a little bit, but they were still using it to that degree. He wasn't as effective doing it. Now, what is the reason? Hopefully, it's what he was dealing with his knee, and he's very obviously closed and hyper focused on not admitting injuries and not wanting to talk about them. And if he's out there, expect the same level of production, which is a good thing, by the way.
I think it can be counterproductive too, though. I mean, if you're dealing with an injury and you're making the money you're making and you have the weapons around you that you're making or that, that are around you, I almost think it'd be better to say that, because now I know, and I get there's a lot of that goes into why he wouldn't say that, but
yeah, you don't want to alert the defense. Not that, they know,
right.
but you don't want to say, hey, my knee hurts.
Yeah, I get it.
And all of a sudden you got 330-pound guys trying to give
Crush
an
you.
extra little shot to try to win a football game. That's unfortunately the violent nature of this game that they try to legislate out, but they're never going to be able to do. So, I mean, he wasn't as effective. He wasn't as explosive running the football. And that's a we'll see situation. If he's back, if he's 100%, he looks like he's explosive as he was in 2022 or 2021. Everything's copacetic. If he's not, then you have to start talking about, maybe shifting the philosophy a little bit. Not you're never going to take the RPO and the zone read stuff out of the Eagles offense as long as Jalen Hurts is here, but maybe more temperate with it, at least a little bit. And that should happen naturally as his career goes on anyway, as he ages. But overall, despite everything we just said, and this is the first time we've talked about Jalen in a long time on this show because there's so many other things to talk about all the time. He still had a pretty good year. It's not like he was terrible.
I thought he was terrible in the playoff game, and that concerns me.
Well, the playoff game, everybody was terrible.
Yeah, but John, everybody, and we just talked about it. Everybody's not the starting quarterback. Everybody's not making $50 million.
Well, and I would say, first of all, this offense is not the same with A.J. Brown off the field. Number one.
That's true.
If
That's
people don't get that, just look at them before A.J. got here. Look at them when A.J. couldn't play in the playoffs. It ain't the same offense. That's number one. Number two, you could argue, just from a number standpoint, his passer rating was over 100. He was one of the better players in Tampa. The defense was just abysmal.
The defense was bad, but John, they put up 9 points.
Yeah, that's
not good, dude.
He didn't play well, but at the bottom of he's 25 of 35, 71%, 250 yards, 100 passer rating. It wasn't Jalen Hurts. You know, Jason Kelsey, who's going to the Hall of Fame, was abused.
Yeah, he was.
Abused in that
I thought that
Tampa.
was the first sign that Kelsey was going to retire.
Well, that wasn't the first sign.
Not the first sign, but I mean the first look. Like, okay,
Yeah,
this is very
his
real. The
teammate,
season's coming to an end, and Jason just got worked. This is very.
he did get work, but that's not the reason he retired. He had told certain people that he was going to retire before the season started. Now he can change his mind, but he you know, I think he just crossed that line in his mind. But he did. All I'm trying to say is he did not play well in the playoffs, and that list is long. And Jalen Hurts was one of the better Eagles in the playoffs, I dare say. Not that's a low bar, granted, but he was one of the better Eagles.
We'll get to a break. We have John Stolness from Bleeding Green Nation on the other side of the break. I want to thank everybody for checking in. Make sure you like the shows. It's the #1 way you can help us grow, help Johnny Mac's opinions and his thoughts reach more Eagles fans, which I think every Eagle fan should hear, because every time we talk to John, every time I talk to John, I learn more about the Eagles and learn more about the game of football. Thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you like the show. On the other side of the break, John Stolness from Bleeding Green Nation. And then in hour number 2, Bill Colarulo. I know a lot of the fans in the chat box are missing Bill Colarulo, so we'll have him up in hour number 2. But coming up after the break, Johnny Stolness. Stay tuned, everybody.